We thank you for taking your time to watch this presentation brought to you by the members of Cape Cod Community College's Phi Theta Kappa Alpha Upsilon Mu chapter. This is Why We Doodle. Every year, our chapter has to pick a topic for an Honors in Action project where we research a topic and take action in our community. This year, we chose the quest of human expression as our theme. We found interest in the topic of doodling after a couple of members of our chapter had watched a CBS interview of Sonny Brown, the author of The Doodle Revolution, a visual facilitator and strong supporter of the benefits of doodling. After discussing the interview, our chapter decided it would be a fun and interesting topic to explore further. It's a relatively new concept that isn't widely discussed, so we all hit the search engines to come up with some answers to our questions. So what is a doodle? Merriam-Webster defines a doodle as an aimless or casual scribble and as a verb meaning to draw something without thinking about what you're doing. Well, because there is such a common misconception and overlooking of the subject, the purpose of this presentation is to spread awareness about the effects and benefits of doodling during times that information needs to be understood and retained for later recollection. The collection of data that we are going to share is important, especially for students and other people that need to learn and remember any information, which includes just about everyone. Whether it's remembering or relaying certain information from a phone call, a board meeting, or course content, doodling may be an overlooked tool by many. Neuroscientific and psychological studies, along with personal testimonies, have shown that doodling can have a profound effect on the way we can solve problems and process information. So why is doodling discouraged? We want you as learners and teachers to question why we stop actively encouraging doodling after a certain age. We want you as learners and teachers to become enthusiastic about the way doodling during lectures actually engages students, engages and improves learning, engages and ignites creativity and expression. We want you to be supporters of the doodle revolution, just as we have become through our research. What is the doodle revolution, you may be asking? The doodle revolution is a reintroduction to and an increased appreciation for visual language. The revolution is taking modern-day misconceptions and cultural stereotypes about doodling and throwing them out to make room for the use of such a valuable and simple technique. As mentioned before, what got us started on the topic was the CBS interview that highlighted Sonny Brown, who's the author of the book named The Doodle Revolution. Sonny's written books on the topic. She founded and owns a visual thinking consultancy. She's been named one of the 100 most creative people in business and one of the 10 most creative people on Twitter by Fast Company. She's convinced of doodling's positive attributes and continually professes the power that doodling possesses in numerous news interviews and through other international speaking opportunities. Just in case you're wondering, a visual or graphic facilitator is a conductor of a group meeting, seminar, workshop, conference, or the like that directs by using the creative technique of large-scale imagery to visually lead groups and guide individuals to meet a particular goal. Although Sonny is not the only visual facilitator around, she certainly seems to be the face of the topic these days. Other guests on that same CBS interview included a philosophy of the mind professor at the City University of New York who describes doodling as a way of staying engaged and claims that he actually encourages doodling in his own classroom. He says that he believes people should be trained to doodle, and he finds that it takes all of the other distractions and throws them away, making a space for real concentration to happen, rather than daydreaming. The interview concludes with some doodle examples by 60 Minutes Morally Safer, whose desk is covered in scrap paper drawings of lines, trees, fruit, and water towers. He himself says that he finds the drawings by the unconscious mind to be satisfying and suggests that perhaps our doodles may define who we are and who we aren't. Pretty deep for such an underestimated task, right? Well, after watching the interview, some of the questions that we wanted to answer through our research included, what is the historical attitude towards doodling compared to the modern day ideals? Is doodling distracting? How is doodling beneficial? Does doodling have the same effect on all types of learners? Does doodling about specific things have an effect on memory and focus? And if doodling helps retain information, how can we inform our community? Well, you are a living example of the answer to the last question, but we'll revisit and answer all of those questions further on in the presentation. First, we'll discuss the current issues that doodling poses. Doodling isn't just something you do when you're bored. Perhaps it is a reaction to boredom, similar to daydreaming. However, whereas daydreaming when you're bored allows your mind to wander into who knows where, doodling when you're bored actually aids concentration by maintaining your attention to the primary task, and it has the ability to engage deeper learning. When doodling occurs under conditions such as impatience, boredom, and indecision, it seems to alleviate those conditions. Studies have found that people actually are able to focus on the main task while they're doodling. There's a lot of resistance to people doodling during times that people should be listening because people often think that it's a distracting counter to the learning process, but this is a gross misunderstanding. It is possible to focus and jar at the same time. It's been proven that the activation of both fine motor skills and gross motor skills before or during academic tasks improves performance, regardless of whether or not there are any learning disabilities. Not only that, but when an individual doodles, the brain may also be highly creative. It's also important to mention that it's not necessarily the quality of the drawing that's beneficial, although Freudian psychoanalysts wouldn't want you to overlook the psychological value of what your doodles say about you. The importance of the behavior is its ability to encourage deep learning by engaging all four learning modalities simultaneously. The four modalities being visual, auditory, reading, writing, and kinesthetic with the possibility of an emotional experience. By engaging in a stimulating activity during times when information needs to be mentally retained, doodlers provide themselves just the right amount of stimulation required to allow improved task performance and reduce disruptive behaviors such as daydreaming, tapping, or stomping. Although dictionaries define the word as an aimless or casual scribble, there's actually two different types of doodles. The more spontaneous drawings that the dictionary refers to are the type that aren't premeditated and engage the right side of the brain. This is the side of the brain that uses more feeling, fantasy, spatial perception, symbols and images, and quite importantly, presents possibilities. And then there are the specific planning type, left brain engaging type of doodles. The left side of the brain, as opposed to the right, is more logical, detail oriented, fact based, practical, and realistic. These are the types of doodles that you'll see a visual facilitator engage in. Either way, both foster the possibility of intense problem solving, and this is why Sunny believes that the definition should be rewritten across the board. She believes that the definition of doodling should be to make spontaneous marks to help yourself think. Here's the evidence that supports our claims. Scientist G.D. Scott wrote an article for the Lancet journal that gives a neuroscientific interpretation of the parallels between doodling and the default network activity in the brain. He suggests that doodling might reveal insights about how the brain functions, and notably when in the idling mode. He states that when an individual doodles, the brain may be highly creative while being occupied by, say, solving mathematical problems or generating ideas for new works in literature, art, or design. He believes that this means doodling fills up the space in the default network of the brain that could otherwise be left to wander off into daydreams. For some doodlers, doodling may be crucial for creativity, whereas for those at the other end of the spectrum, doodling seems to be relaxing or simply entertaining. Since doodling is a motor act, when occurring under conditions such as impatience, boredom, and indecision, it seems to alleviate those conditions. Therefore, doodling may prove to be a unique untapped resource for investigating different aspects of brain function and has the potential to provide therapeutic benefits. The belief of the positive relationship between doodling and focusing can also be supported by the results of an experiment done by psychologists Evander Banda and Sunita Kirkud. They tested the effects of physical activity on children's performance while doing a listening comprehension task. They found that the activation of both fine motor skills and gross motor skills before or during academic tasks improves the child's performance, regardless of whether or not the child has learning disabilities. Of the 4 children who participated in the study, 2, one of each sex, were diagnosed with learning disabilities, and 2, also one of each sex, were not. The study found that doodling does not only enhance children's academic performance, but according to the children, it is a preferred tool in the classroom as well. In the Applied Cognitive Psychology journal, Jackie Andre discusses her own case study through an article titled, "What Does Doodling Do?" This was one of the first experiments specifically testing the prediction that doodling aids concentration. Not only did this experiment show evidence of doodling and reduced daydreaming in addition to enhanced academic performance, but that doodling has also been shown to enhance memory as well. The participants recruited were from the general population and aged between 18 and 55 years. They were brought in just after finishing an unrelated experiment for another researcher, with the intention of enhancing the boredom of the task by testing people who were already thinking about going home. The testing room was also intentionally quiet and visually dull. The participants were split into two groups, doodling and non-doodling, and asked to listen to a monotonous phone message. An auditory task was chosen so that the doodling wouldn't greatly compete for the same modality-specific resources. Doodling participants shaded shapes and had a left-hand margin to write notes. Control participants could write the target info on a lined piece of paper. Rather than being asked to doodle freely, the doodling participants were asked to shade in printed shapes on the response sheet without worrying about the speed and neatness of their shading, in hopes that the simplicity of the shading would encourage a degree of absent-mindedness in participants' drawing, much like in naturalistic conditions. Also, to avoid any self-consciousness about their drawings or create any suspicion that the content of their doodles was the actual focus of the study. During the experiment, although 4 members suspected the experiment was a memory test, none actively tried to remember information. Participants who performed a shape shading task concentrated better on the mock telephone message than participants who listened to the message with no concurrent task. This benefit was seen with a surprise memory test, where doodling participants were shown to have remembered 29% more than the non-doodlers. 3 other researchers, Sharon Ainsworth, Von Prane, and Russell Teitler, decided to test the theory of drawing to learn in their science classes. They encouraged students to draw what they learned during lecture and while doing assigned readings. The students who drew not only retained more information, but they also reported more enjoyment and engagement with the course material. The motivation behind the investigation came from the fact that scientists do not use words only, but rely on diagrams, graphs, videos, photographs, and other images to make discoveries, explain findings, and excite public interest. Scientists imagine new relations, test ideas, and elaborate knowledge through visual representations. The researchers realized that when drawing does occur in class, it is rare that learners are systematically encouraged to create their own visual forms to develop and show understanding. Yet drawing and doodling actually enhances engagement and creates the potential for more interactive learning. The surveys of teachers and students gathered afterwards indicated that when students drew to explore, coordinate, and justify understandings in science, they were more motivated to learn than from the conventional teachings. The use of drawing and doodling caters to individual learner differences, as a drawing is shaped by the learner's current of emerging ideas. This means that drawing and doodling can be an effective learning strategy, as it helps learners overcome limitations in presented material, organize their knowledge more effectively, and integrate new and existing understanding. Drawing externalizes private knowledge more permanently and is a visual representation that enables broader dissemination. Through drawing and doodling, students can make their thinking explicit and specific, which leads to opportunities to exchange and clarify meanings between peers. Doodling has also been shown to simplify complex problems. In a Constitutional Forum Journal article, Rebecca Johnson describes the reflection process of her students' experience using visually based pedagogies of mapping as a tool to explore complicated legal issues and translating those understandings of law and justice from words to images. After students were split up into groups, some of the groups expressed worry about their lack of drawing skills, but took on the challenge with good humor. The exercise generated lively discussion about the dynamics of group decision-making. Even the messiest map provided the clearest sense of relations between the relations of health, economy, poverty, government, and family, which was the task at hand. The exercise did not lead to the conclusion that any particular mapping was the right way to capture the case, nor even that mapping is always a productive tool, but each map provided another interesting vehicle for thinking through the ways in which one might understand the various aspects of their case. By the end of the doodling experience, each of the 4 groups had maps that gave them a broader range of tools for understanding and sharing observations, and they were able to make particular challenges and tools visible through that mapping. After 2 days of intense concentration on their particular issues, regardless of the group's artistic abilities, the drawings help foster deeper comprehension amongst the participants by visually connecting the different complex relationships. Despite the abundance of proven benefits, our intense research on this subject has shown us that doodling isn't always beneficial for everyone. An article written by Elaine Chan for the University of British Columbia's Undergraduate Journal of Psychology explains the negative effect that doodling can have on visual recall. The case study aimed to determine whether doodling would affect performance on visual recall as opposed to auditory recall, determined that multitasking in activities which require the same primary modality as that of the main task can have a negative effect on the amount of information processed and retained. In this experiment, participants were randomly assigned to either doodling or non-doodling conditions. They were asked to observe a collection of images, then instructed to recall those images from a second list presented directly afterwards. The doodling group instructed to doodle while observing the first set of images. The average number of recalled images by doodlers was significantly less as their visual processing resources were divided between 2 tasks. As both doodling and the main visual recall task of the experiment required visual processing by the brain, performance on the recall of images was impaired. This study proposes that doodling may only be beneficial in a dual task situation where the 2 tasks do not compete for the same information processing resources. When a person does engage in tasks that demand the use of the same pathways, information may not be processed to the same degree as when there is solely one visual task because the capacity of the visual system is limited. There is a competition for cognitive resources. There are some confounds that are important to note when referring to the results of this study, however. The participants happened to be volunteers from an undergraduate psych class and were told prior to the task that they would be tested on recall. As a result of this, participants had an incentive to focus on the images and devote their attention to the task, hereby resisting from any mind wandering such as daydreaming that might occur in a natural setting. Also, the images in the slideshows were not strictly neutral and could have generated some motion or memory in the participants which could have affected their recall. The doodlers weren't given a mindless drawing task such as a simple shape. They were asked to draw a flower, and not a specific flower either. Had it been a more naturalistic doodling setup, it would have allowed more cognitive resources to be devoted to the primary recall task. It is also possible that the doodlers viewed the images for a shorter duration of time than the non-doodlers. The viewing time of each participant to the slideshow images was therefore inconsistent and uncontrolled. So what we hoped you learned by this point is that studies have shown when information density and the need to process that information is high, doodling should actually be encouraged rather than dismissed or disapproved. Doodling has the potential to reduce daydreaming, enhance memory, enhance information processing, and help to simplify complexities. This information is important because doodling is a behavior that has been shown to help people stay focused and grasp new concepts, generate bursts of insight, new ideas, ease patience, retain information, and solve complex problems. Understanding the role of boredom and daydreaming and being mindful of a task that alleviates both would allow a more productive atmosphere in real-life work and educational settings. The research we have gathered for you all shows that instead of doodlers being reprimanded for doodling, it might actually be beneficial to encourage and include doodling behaviors during academic-like tasks. If the subject is studied and tested further, it has the possibility to open even more doors for easier learning, understanding, and stronger memory skills for many different types of people. More awareness leads to more research, which can then lead to more questions being answered. Questions such as whether or not language barriers have an effect, does the subject matter change the level of beneficial qualities, and whether or not age or gender plays a role in the benefits of doodling. It seems a little silly to talk about at first, but upon a deeper understanding, it's clear that this type of behavior can change lives. Some of the companies that have realized the value of doodling include MIT, Disney, Google, Dell, and the American Cancer Society. In fact, in the UK, February 6, 2015 will be National Doodle Day, a fundraising event that's focused on raising money through sharing community and global doodles, all for the epilepsy action in England. Google even encourages people to send their doodles to proposals@google.com for a chance to be the contributor for the Google Doodle of the Day. Now that you know the real deal about doodling, test it out. Make use of it in the classroom, tell your peers about it, or better yet, tell your teachers, your children, and your children's children about it. The more the word spreads and the more awareness there is about the benefits of doodling, the more that doodling can actually offer to everyone. Take it to the next level by researching the visual facilitators in your area or by visiting Sunny Brown's website where you can find other resources that can train you how to make the most of your doodles. She actually provides various trainings to help doodling skills such as personal info doodling, which is visual note taking for your own recollection, performance info doodling, which is mapping content visually during a meeting, innovation design, which is deconstructing the process of getting good ideas, and brain training, which helps to direct your mind. When you find yourself doodling, whether it's of stick figures and circles or faces and animals during the times that you're really supposed to be paying attention, you're not alone, and don't be ashamed. In fact, it's almost instinctual. From medieval scribes to revolutionary inventors to modern day presidents, doodling is a very common occurrence. We thought it would be fun to leave you with some of these silly presidential doodles. Thanks so much for listening, and please leave your comments below.